questions were for you.
Can I ask you something before you go?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will be quick. Thank you. Okay, thank you for your presentation, and beautiful actually presentation of Butler's and Balibar's theory. And right now I'm thinking about the consequences of someone's acts. When we speak about trans-individual, and your sentence, one of the sentence was, it's not a man-making institution, it's institution-making man. Right now I have Hannah Arendt theory in my mind, and her thought about agency and power of someone's agency. And when we speak about trans-individual, right now I'm interested in your thoughts about consequences of acts of one trans-individual in a way it is defined in the theories you have beautifully presented to us.
So what would be the conception of agency for Balibar from this trans-individual notion? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and consequences of someone's act. When we speak about trans-individual in that sense, consequences of that would be, by your opinion?
First one is there's no such thing as a determined outline or a contour of individuality. You cannot say I finished what Sarah was presenting on Butler is, I think it's very close to what Balibar is trying to put forward with his notion of misbeing, because what he means is there's no such thing as individuals. Individuals are like an optical effect of these trans-individual networks. So that doesn't prevent us from acting. Au contraire, I think it's a very, it's because I'm in that network, because I have that support, because I'm being given this identity that I can act. It's also because I'm in this network that I risk violence, that I risk being hurt, that I risk being injured, that it's that double dimension of it. And also what he says is the trans-individual, we are all individuals that are defined through this relational condition. And he equates the human, he says the human is a citizen. Not the citizen with a passport of citizen, but the citizen more broadly understood as the one that is configured by institutions. And institutions is nothing other than this network of relations. So it can be, the institution could be any sort of institution, friendship institution,
even one that institution.
Exactly, but when that institution has some acts and it includes violence in it, which responsibility, if we speak about trans-individual, is it?
Whose is the responsibility?
Yes, especially when, why I'm asking and use Hannah Arendt theory, because her thoughts about violence and huge war consequences and fascism, etc. And when we speak about networks, whose responsibility is it exactly when we speak about violence on someone else, not that
So it's
particular.
not, I understand. So the problem is not that I cannot claim responsibility. I can play that I'm innocent because it's just the network that forced me into that. Right? I'm not. I didn't hurt this person, which is the patriarchy forcing me to hurt her. It's not that, because what Balibar is saying is that trans-individuality gives you a condition of citizenship, but from there you act. It's not that you are dissolved into a collectivity that blurs responsibility or agency. Is that you are an individual thanks to that network, but once you get the power to act from that network, you're responsible for what you do. You cannot put the blame on the network, even though you are a result of that network. I mean, I'm alive because somebody nurtured me and somebody took care of me, and I cannot put the blame on them and say, oh, if I turned out poorly, it's their fault, right? If I'm a mess, it's not my fault. But yet, all I am is thank you to all that support, both human and non-human. But that claim doesn't entail that I can play innocent for anything that I do, or that I'm not responsible for my own agency, if I'm responding to your question.
Just a short question to you.
The problem, I'm so sorry because
but what happens?
What
happens when the institution is excluding you? Because I really think of this when the institution is really nurturing me or giving me the chance to go forward, but I'm a part of the institution when the institution is excluding me from this institution.
As well, yeah.
Okay.
As well.
Okay.
No, you're giving that identity as excluded from the institution.
Okay.
So you're not qualifying as human. You're not qualifying as citizen. So, what?
No, a small question for you, but later. Citizen. Have you finished?
I'm not sure. The whole point is we don't escape those networks. There's not a point. The excluded is not one. Butler makes this point when she talks about Agamben's notion of bare life. Mm-hmm. She says the notion of bare life seems to imply or to intimate that there's such thing as a life excluded from political power, from political relations, and what she claims that every life, even the bare life, even the life of those who are excluded, even the life of those who are suffering violence, is exposed to relations of power. So whether you're in or you're out, you're trans-individual. Now, what Balibar claims is this is the place where we are exposed to exclusion, to violence, to any sort of injury. But also that same place, that very place, is the place from where we can claim our right to be citizens, or he uses our right to have rights. As like, because I am instituted, because I am part of you, whatever you do with your violence, you will not be able to obliterate that unless you obliterate the whole network.
The bad part is
The question is for...
sorry, my bad.
I'm really sorry.
I had a very quick question. So very brief. It's just like you mentioned that
I'm supposed to touch a point at the time.
this new humanism was supposed to be an answer to neoliberalism, right? And to this sort of forced diversification, forced fluidity. The thing is, I don't see how these new versions of the human exactly pose a challenge to that. How can you resist this forced diversification, this forced fluidity, once you see yourself as part of this network?
You're putting a limit. You're saying, I cannot be anything that you want me to be. I cannot be infinitely flexible. I cannot be infinitely plastic. There are some things that make my life unlivable. There are some things that should be intolerable. There are certain things that pose a limit to that violence. So it's not going back to a form of essential identity, but it's a form of putting some sort of minimum identity to say, hey, what you're doing is inhuman. Otherwise, if you give away the notion of the human, everything can be done, because there's no limit to it. So the human is not something that comes before. If you want, these notions of the human are not previous to the violence, to extreme violence and extreme precarity. They are a response to this situation. So it's an insurrectionary ontology. It's a reaction. It's not a first ontological principle. I'm very sorry. I know this is so rude to leave in the middle of the debate, but I agreed to do this panel in March of this year. I cannot just show up. I'm very sorry. We'll see you tomorrow. Yes,
please.
I'll come to
We have many
it.
questions for you.
Other questions? Comments?
Sí, esto sí.
Okay, I would like to pose one question to Nuria. I was trying to be very attentive, but I really have to say that even though I very much agree with your conclusion, the dimming of a universal framework is steering the choice of a satisfying form of life, perhaps will help us to perceive other paths to livability. This is exactly something that I would also wish to, find ways to think of, but I cannot understand really why forms of life, why that paradigm, why that figure, forms of life, even though it's the central concept. Can you just tell us what forced you to use that concept exactly? Why forms of life?
I could try to display Jagi's account of forms of life, or Jagi's use of this paradigm. Forms of life aims at outline, give us a picture about how people organize collectively their life and satisfy their needs. Forms of life is if a social deed, it's a social phenomenon, but a social phenomenon that make us questions and invites us to open queries about the grounds they have, about the legitimation they possess. Indeed, forms of life is a contemporary syntagma to recall to objective spirit, to Hegelian objective spirit. We all live and were born feeling us immersed, feeling us ingrained in forms of life that we have not personally chosen. So forms of life tend to be or have, usually have an impersonal content, a high impersonal content. But what I especially value in this theory of Rael Jegi, also in the assumption that Robin Chelikatos has about this paradigm, is the fact that forms of life are not so closed as we suppose to view them. They are not so good structured, so inflexible. They are not so so coherently articulated as we normally are educated to follow them and to live at ease with them. If Jegi's hypothesis has any possibility to open up an interesting query about patterns of life in neoliberal times, I think this positive dimension is related with the fact that we only recently became aware about the possibilities to build up, to negotiate new forms of life, new models of families, new models of parenting. We were not prepared. Normally, also we were not educated to participate, to actively participate in this social creation. But current social activism, social movements have achieved to legitimate, have achieved to reshape this outsizing, impersonal and social patterns, these social guidelines that we relate with the form we are living. Also the forms that allow us to reproduce and to take care of life. Naturally, the most sensible, probably the most sensible feature of this discussion is linked with the juridical effects of these claims, because I think this is a issue that concerns me so much. On the one side, we can find several examples in our societies, in progressive societies, naturally, where forms of life are related or are reduced to a personal subjective choice. Normally this kind of accounts are based on the theories about the possibility of an ethical design of the own life, more Foucauldian or not so Foucauldian frameworks about the capacity of life to be redesigned, to be reconstructed from an aesthetical point of view. But on the other side, we find very sound, very staunch hindrances that eschew the fact that our morphological social structure may change, may substantially change. This change has to do with an enlargement of the landscape, the social landscape we are used to, and we are educated, we are used to recognize as valuable, as tolerable. This enlargement, this juridical enlargement of our social world, I think needs to experience some review, some review related with the fact that, for example, many people argue for an extension and a reframe, a redefinition of the relationships, of the articulation between the state and the intimate sphere. We are not mature enough, still not mature enough, to recognize which kind of juridical patterns should not reproduce but recognize, give a social avowal to realities which are active, are present in our social experience. I would like to highlight this dichotomy between social and intimate experience and common juridical experience. Our juridical patterns are so subjected, so shaped under the framework of this binary male-female, family-based entity.
Can I have one tiny question? Intimate would pertain to experiential, to what are my personal contents in a dichotomy to the form of life. I'm just trying to understand the idea of form of life. True form contents binarism also. Am I right? I mean, is state is giving us some kind of contents through political actions, through laws, through various ways to, I don't know, shape, to form our intimate lives, which has our own experiential contents, but there is also something which can be termed social form of life, something which is a kind of mediator. Does that make sense? I'm trying to...
Yes, well, I think I grasp your point. Jackie's account try to put in the center of the analysis, in the center of the agenda of critical theory, the fact that the modern state shows a concrete intimate life. The bourgeois modern state and its institutions decided to recognize and to give a vowel to a concrete, value-based and pragmatically cunning frame, family life, kinship relations. But I think the moment is arrived to decide if to enlarge the landscape and to reflect about the necessity or the contingency of this choice will not be a benefit for our emancipatory discourses and emancipatory claims. Because what I will say when I heard Sylvain Agacinski talking about gay families, gay kinships, are menacing our symbolic appraisal of human life. And when she recurs, when she appeals to Levi-Strauss elementary elements of kinship, when she makes this kind of decisions, I think she's highlighting, she's evincing the dependency she has with regard to a symbolic account of social work. But this account is not the only possible, and it's not just the one account loyal with what we may call livability. Livability can argue for another solutions, for another possibilities, another constructions. Because when we speak about forms of life, we have to get used to combine elements that come from the nature, but a large group of elements stemming from art, from technique, from invention. I think we still tend to forget, to conceal the fact that a model like the bourgeois modern family was an agreement, a social agreement, a contingent, historical agreement. We have to renegotiate these linkages between intimate life, in this sense, between intimate life and the state. Because the state continues to treat as minor people, as people in minority age, gay people, queer people. The issue about non-monogamic people, Pablo Pérez Navarro has intensively worked in this direction. This is a very ticklish dimension. This is a very thorny issue, but also very interesting. Our societies have extremely constantly deal with non-monogamic relationships. But this kind of relationships were relegated to the margins, were marginalized.
Very non-bourgeois.
This is a thorny issue, but I think this post-marriage movement invites us to face and to deal this kind of quandaries, social quandaries. I don't know if I...
Very nice.
no more questions. If there's no more questions, we will meet tomorrow here, no? At 10:30.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit later.
No. 10:30.
Yeah, yeah.
10:30. According to this, why? Is there any problem? No problem.
Okay. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Let's go.